This week for Project 4, we will pick up where we left off with the room last week. So this should be the point you are at the end of Project 3, Part 2. What we'll do this week, also in 2 parts, is Part 1, we will finish the modeling, which is really simple. We'll create the 2 shutters for the windows and we'll extrude a backdrop. After we do that, we will apply textures to the room. We'll apply 1 stock texture and then we'll create several custom textures and apply those. When that's done, we will insert lighting to the model, which will allow us to generate a finished color rendering of the room. That will complete Part 1. And then for Part 2, we will take the 3D model and generate 2D plans. We'll do a ground plan, a section, and a couple of elevations. So in order to get started, I'm going to save my copy of Project 3, Part 2 as Project 4, Part 1. After the file is saved, we will go back to the scenery design layer. I'm going to go into top plan to get out of perspective and then go back to front. And then before we get started on the shutters, I discovered that at least in my file, maybe in yours, maybe not, the stock windows have an issue we need to fix. There's sort of an extra plane here. The muntins are on top of the frame rather than inside of the frame, which doesn't make a whole lot of sense. If that isn't readily apparent, let me show you what I'm talking about. So this part right here should not be sticking out from that part. I don't know why it would do that, but it's easy to fix. If I select the window and go to Object Info and then find the muntins, I just need to change the depth from 1 inch to 1/2 inch, and then you'll see that now makes a whole lot more sense. I'm going to do the same thing to the other window. Yours may not be like this, but if it is, you'll want to fix yours too. I discovered that when I went to make the shutters and had some issues and then realized, oh, there's a whole extra plane of wood in here that doesn't belong. So once that's fixed, we're going to go back to front. We'll start with the large window first. I'm going to select the rectangle tool in its first mode and make sure I'm in automatic working plane, and then I want to draw a rectangle on the plane of the bottom window frame. So I'm going to make sure that frame is purple, start the lower left hand corner here, and then go up to the top right corner. So we'll have that rectangle, and then I'm going to go ahead and group that with itself. Command G. Because it's going to be easier to work inside the group. Then I can double click on the group to edit. And the first thing I want to do is create the frame of the shutter. So I'm going to use the offset tool set to 2 inches. We'll click inside our rectangle. Then we'll select both rectangles and do a clip surface and then hit delete. So there's our our shutter frame. And then I'm going to work on the shutter, what are these called? Blades, maybe? I should know that. I'll have to look that up. But this part of the shutter. This is a plantation shutter, so I'm going to go ahead and make these 3 inches deep. So that should be -3. -3. Return. And then just to make sure that they fit, I'm going to go ahead and duplicate them. I'm just continuously duplicating. Okay, so that fits. If I wanted to, I could spread these out. Well, let's just go ahead and do that. So I'm going to put this one in the lower corner to align it. Then I'm going to select all of them and do a modify, align, distribute. And then I'm going to distribute them by spacing from top to bottom. So that evenly spaces them. All I really needed out of that was the center point of the top 2 shutters. I'm going to go ahead and do 3. So I just need to know where the center of those are. Then I can delete the rest of these. So I'm going to extrude the frame 3/4 of an inch. Model extrude 0.75. And then I'm going to make the blade 1/4 of an inch deep. Model extrude 0.25. And then in order to open the shutter, I need to angle the blade, so I'm going to go to left view. And I don't know, let's pick an angle. Let's try 45 degrees. Modify, rotate 45. Maybe make them a little more open than that, so I'm going to rotate it another 15 degrees to take it to 60. Okay, that seems good. I'm going to switch to wireframe for a sec so I can line up the center of the blade with the center of the frame in this view. Then I'm going to go back to front view. And now I can take the blade and put it there, lined up with where the center of the first one should be. And then I'm going to duplicate that, grab it by its midpoint, and move it to where the second one should be. And then I can just keep duplicating until they're all there. Then we're going to look at this in OpenGL. Okay, that looks good. I will say that I could have made this into a symbol since I'm duplicating it, because that's usually good practice is if you're making more than 1 or 2 copies of something to turn it into a symbol. But for this particular thing, it's not going to do me a whole lot of good. I'm going to have to create a different size blade for the other window. If I was making multiple shutters that had the same size blade, I would certainly have turned that into a symbol. But since that's not the case, I think I'm just going to leave it as an independent component. Then I can exit group, and there's our shutter that looks like it needs to be adjusted a little bit because it's going into the window, the Muntins. So we'll go to wireframe and left view, and you can see how that is it's hitting the glass there. So I'm just going to move this, modify, move. Let's try this 0.75. There we go. So that should be good. The glass will be in the middle of the Muntins, so this would just clear the glass. So if we go back to front view, and let's just look at this in OpenGL and see if that all makes sense, and it does. Okay, good. So now we can just do the same process for the other window. So we'll use our rectangle tool on this plane. We'll group this, double click, offset tool, select them both, clip surface, delete. -3 inches, duplicate, align this with the bottom, select them all, align, distribute spacing from top to bottom. There they are. We're going to mark the center point of the top 2. Can then get rid of all of them except the top. Going to extrude our frame 3/4 of an inch. Extrude our blade 1/4 of an inch. switch to left, rotate 60 degrees because we did 45 plus 15 last time. Go to wireframe, align the center of this with the center of the frame. I'm going to go back to front and align in this view the center of the blade with the center. Which center do we actually want? There we go. Because it's tilted, there's a front center and a back center. We're going to duplicate that. Duplicate it several more times. Delete our markers. We'll look at this in OpenGL. Everything looks good. We'll close the group. We're going to go this time to right view to adjust where it is in the window. Right. We'll go to wireframe, and then we will check and see, yes, it is hitting the blades. The buttons again, we'll move it. Modify, move to the left 3/4 of an inch. And that should do it. Then we'll go back to front perspective and take a look and see, yep, those look like shutters. Okay, so far so good. And then the last part of our modeling is we want to create a backdrop in the back here. So I'm going to draw a rectangle that is the width of the set and is 1 inch high. This could represent a cloth backdrop. It could be a vinyl Translux backdrop. It could be flats. So it might not actually be 1 inch. It might be, really thin if it's fabric or vinyl or something. But 1 inch is a good sort of stand-in. And then we're going to extrude that the height of the set, which is 12 feet 6. Okay. And then I'm going to move it 4 feet upstage. 0.48. Okay. I'm going to switch to left and just make sure that that's where I thought it would be. Yes. Temporarily make this green so we can actually see it through the windows. Then we'll go back to front perspective, and there's our backdrop, and that completes the modeling of the room. So now that we have it modeled, we will move on to creating textures. To start the texture process, let's take a look at where we're headed. So this is the render of the room. As I said with last week's project, you are more than welcome to change up the textures. What I'm going to do is show you how to apply and create these textures, and then you are welcome to change them up if you want to. The methods would be the same. You would just change particular settings or import different images. So we're using one stock texture, which is the texture for the floor and the stair treads, and then we're creating a custom texture to be the beadboard here, and another custom texture to be the wallpaper and the paint at the top of the wall. And then a third texture that is the white paint on all of the other parts of the room that matches the white of the beadboard. And then finally, we're creating a texture to be the backdrop for the room. So the first thing we'll do is apply the stock texture to the floor. In order to texture the floor, since it is a symbol, we will need to edit the symbol. So I'm going to double click on the floor and I want to edit the 3D component. I'm going to select it and then go to the render tab in Object Info, and I want to apply a texture. Oh look, the exact right one came up. But in case that doesn't happen for you, this is an Arrowway wood floor called Merbau. So if you search MERBAU and hit return, you will find it here. Floor Arrowway Wood Flooring 17 Merbau, which is in probably this file. At any rate, if you search that, you'll find it. I discovered this by looking at about 15 different types of floor to find one I liked for the model. You're welcome to use any of them, but if you want to use this one, it is Merbau. So as soon as that's selected, it applies to the floor. In the version I used, it seemed a little small to me. The planks seemed a little small, so I scaled it up 200%, scale of 2, which seemed more appropriate to me. So that is the texture for the floor. And then I could just exit symbol, and the texture will be applied. So I'm going to apply the same texture to the stair treads. So I will double click on the staircase. We'll select one of the treads. It is also a symbol, so we'll double click on that. We want to edit the 3D component. Go to the render tab, tell it texture, and it should apply the last texture that you used. So it should apply the wood floor. If it doesn't, you can search for it, but it should do that. So it's as simple as that. If we exit that, you'll see that all of the treads are now have the wood grain because they're symbols, except for the landing, which is different. So we'll double click on that to edit its 3D component. We will apply a texture, and that is it. If we want to make it the same scale as the actual floor, we can do that. It's a design choice of which way, since it's this landing, which way it's actually rotated. I think it might look better if it were rotated 90 degrees, so it goes in that direction, but entirely up to you. I just want to check the scale. I think, yeah, I did not change the scale on the treads, so I'm going to double click on this one again to go back to edit and just change the scale to 2. So now they'll match the floor. One of the sort of irritating things about Vectorworks textures is that they don't always apply logically, at least not logically to me. You'll notice that it's going in the right direction on the top, and then suddenly it's going the wrong way on the side here where we did the extrude along path, and there really isn't any way to fix that, unfortunately. That's just the way the program is designed. I think the theory is Vectorworks is not made to do super high-end 3D modeling where the 3D modeling is and rendering it is the final product. Like, you're not going to make a movie with Vectorworks. You're just creating a design representation of the real stair that's going to be built. If that's irritating, then I agree. There isn't really any way to. You can try to change the mapping. If you do plane mapping, that doesn't help. Auto align plane. It's still the same problem. So there really isn't a good way to solve that, unfortunately. But it really doesn't, by the time you back out far enough to do the render, it doesn't really make that much difference. So that is our one stock texture, and the rest of the textures are custom textures. The custom textures will all be based on images, and before we start creating them, I want to talk about where the images came from. So we're going to be using these images. We'll start with the first one, which is beadboard. So just in case you're not familiar with beadboard, this is beadboard. You've probably seen it. traditionally it was individual pieces of lumber that were stacked together, but now you buy it in 4x8 sheets. So when we modeled the room, we modeled the baseboard and the shoe molding and the chair rail, but for the beadboard, we just modeled a flat board, a 1/4-inch thick board, rather than modeling all of the individual lines in the beadboard. It's easier to just use a texture for that. So that's what we're doing. So I found this image of a beadboard. This was probably maybe, I don't know, on the Lowe's or Home Depot website where they sell it. And took it into Photoshop and edited it so it's a seamless image, so that when it repeats, when this side repeats on this side, it's spaced so that this board is the same width as all the other boards, so it's a seamless repeat. So that's where that image came from. It's just a pull from the web that was cleaned up a little bit in Photoshop. Then I took that same image and in Photoshop turned it into a grayscale image and pushed the contrast a little bit to make the grooves stand out. We're going to be using this as a bump image. The backdrop is just an image of some tropical foliage that I found. Since this house has its plantation shutters, I decided that probably meant it was southern or California or an island somewhere. So I just pulled this image to be the backdrop. The wallpaper in the room was created in Photoshop with a seamless image of wallpaper and a sample of the gray that was then just filled in at the top of the wall. And finally, the white paint that we're going to be using is, you're going to say, why would you do that? Why not just use white? I wanted to make sure that the white matched the beadboard, so I just, in Photoshop, took a sample of this white color and then created a white square using that color. So that's where all of those images came from. So let's start using them by creating the beadboard image. In order to create the beadboard image, we need to know what size it should be. So I'm going to go to top to get out of perspective and then go to front, and I just need to know the height of this wall. So if I select that, it will tell me that it is in fact 3 feet 6. Okay, so I want the texture to be 3 feet 6 tall. So I'm going to go to Resource Manager and create a new resource. And I want it to be a RenderWorks texture. We're going to call this beadboard. The color is going to be an image. I want to import an image file. I'm going to find the beadboard image, wherever it is on your computer. So the beadboard JPEG. We'll say OK. I'm going to have no reflectivity. I'm going to have no transparency. I'm going to have a bump, which is going to make it seem like the grooves are more realistic, basically, as what we're doing with the bump. So that we can see that, I'm going to go ahead and set the size. So the size is going to be 3 feet 6 or 42 inches. And then, I just hit return by mistake. So I'm going to go back to edit. I'm going to change my preview to 48 inches so I can see more of what's going on. Then for the bump, I want to do an image bump. So I want to import an image file. You can sometimes just reuse the texture's color as the bump file if you want to do that, but I usually find that you have to push the contrast and make the gray part stand out more. So you usually need a separate file. So we're going to say OK. And then we'll find the beadboard bump and import that. Okay, and you might have seen it just a little bit, but that just sort of clarifies the grooves. You'll perhaps see it more when we do the actual rendering. It also occurs to me that the size, we need to set the size by image because it defaults, when you give it a size, it defaults to the width, and what we actually need to do is set the height. So we're going to set the size from the color image, and there's this little widget that if you put that widget where you want it, then you can indicate the size of the widget. So because I want to set the height of the beadboard, I'm going to line the widget up so that it goes straight from top to bottom, and then I can say that this is 42 inches or 3 feet 6. And you'll notice the overall size changed to 2 foot 4 because that I didn't have a square beadboard, I had a rectangle of beadboard. So that is my beadboard texture. I'm going to click OK. And then we'll apply it to the wall. So this is a solid subtraction, so we should just be able to apply it directly. Let's see what happens. There it is. It's turned in the wrong direction on that one piece. That's interesting. I think if we change this to auto align plane, yes, that will, so it will automatically align itself going in the right direction. So there's the beadboard there. We can apply the same texture on this side. Drag it down, change it to auto align plane. And there we have the beadboard texture. You won't see the effect of the bump in OpenGL. We'll have to get into a RenderWorks mode to have that take effect. Now there should be beadboard right here, and this is tricky because this is all part of the stairs, and if I apply beadboard here, I will get also beadboard on the rest of the stairs where I don't want it. So what I need to do here is create a little thin extrusion to give me a surface, a separate surface to apply the beadboard to. So I'm going to double click on the stairs, and there are a couple ways I could do this. I could extract this surface, but I think instead I'm just going to draw this shape right on top of itself. And I'm going to extrude it not very much, 0.01. That's really all I need to have a surface to apply a texture to. So I'm going to go back to OpenGL, then I have this separate surface that I can apply the beadboard to. Ooh, that's interesting. Let's see what happens if we auto align plane. There we go. Okay, great. So sometimes if you have a single object that needs to have multiple textures on it, the easy way to deal with that is just to create a separate surface or several separate surfaces that are very thin to use to apply the textures to. So that is the beadboard texture. Next, we'll create the wall texture. So back to Resource Manager, new resource. We're going to create a RenderWorks texture. We're going to call this wallpaper, even though it's slightly more than that. We want the color to be an image. We're going to import the wallpaper image. Click OK. Everything else is going to stay the same. There's no reflectivity, there's no transparency, there's no bump on this one. We need to set this size, however, with the widget. So, because we know the height, which is 12 feet 6. Okay, we can change this to 12 feet. This, as I said in the texture introduction at the beginning of this week, this doesn't really affect anything other than it's the preview that you see in here. So if it's not the right size, then it's going to be hard to tell what this is, but it doesn't actually affect the texture in any way. So that should do that. We're going to say OK. And then we can apply this texture to our walls. Let's see what happens. So walls are a little tricky to apply textures to because there are several sides to the wall. So and you would think that when you apply it, it would just apply it first to all the sides and then let you adjust it, but it kind of doesn't work that way. So it's got the overall texture, but I can't see it. So I need to apply it to either the left side of the wall, or the right side of the wall, depending on which side this is. I think because of the direction we drew it in, I think this is the right side of the wall. So we're going to find out. So we're going to go to right and texture. Yep. Okay, that was the right side of the wall. So you sometimes just have to play with the walls. So I'm going to go ahead and put myself in an isometric here so I can see more of the walls. Select all of the walls and go ahead and let's just see if we can, what the chances are that these are all the right side of the wall. Interesting that, so this one seems like it needs the, okay, well that worked. If you're not getting the right texture, just cycle through, put it on the left. You'll notice that I have control here over things like end caps and the top and the bottom. So for instance, there shouldn't actually be texture, there shouldn't be wallpaper on the top of the wall. Nobody's ever going to see that. So if I wanted to clean that up, I could so let's see if we go to top, none. Yeah, you can clean that up. So you do have individual control over the left side of the wall, the right side of the wall, the end caps. This would be an end cap, and the top and the bottom. You can apply the same texture. You can apply different textures because obviously there are times when both sides of the wall wouldn't be the same. But that is the wall texture. So next we will create the white texture to apply to everything else. So resource manager, new resource texture, white paint. Image, yes, white paint. Okay. In this particular case, it doesn't matter what size it is because it's a solid color. So it can be 1 inch, it could be 1,000 feet. It doesn't make any difference. The only time the size matters is when it's an image that has an actual image. But if you're just dealing with something like a solid color, or if you look at some of the metal textures, you'll notice that their image is 1 inch because there's no measurable image involved. So we're just going to leave it at 1 inch. Okay. Then we'll just apply the white texture to the things that need it. Oh, interesting. Once it will sometimes come up with the first thing in the list. So we want white paint there. We'll select the molding and the shutters. We'll have to do the windows separately. So this molding, that molding, this molding, that should be everything except the windows and doors, texture, and why is it not letting me select? It wants to put the backdrop for some reason on there, white paint. Here. Oh, I see why. There are two different types of objects, and it doesn't like to deal with different types of objects in the same way. So the shutters are groups, and it deals with textures of groups slightly differently. Oops. So white paint. And it will deal with objects in walls differently than it does the other objects. You can still apply the texture, you just don't get all of the different options that you get with singular objects, but we don't really need for the white paint any of the mapping options. So okay, there's all of the white paint except for the staircase. We'll go into the staircase and we'll select that, which is the base of the staircase. The four, these are symbols, right? So let's do the symbols first. Edit. So we're going to want to put white paint or the backdrop. That's kind of fun. There. So that took care of the top two. You're probably not seeing a lot of difference here. This white paint is almost white. I probably could have just done a white color, but in the rendering it actually does look slightly different with the white paint texture applied to it as opposed to just the white. This is a symbol, so we'll apply the texture to that. This faster way to do this might be just to drag. Yep, let's do that. This is a symbol. There's that. It should have taken care of the other side, and then the spindles or the balusters. And remember, these are in 3 different parts, so you have to apply the texture to, or actually 2 parts to both parts. So that should take care of the stairs. So that is all of the white paint, and so the next step will be to create the backdrop texture, which you'll notice was already in this file because of the magic of video editing. So we'll actually create that texture next. Now you'll notice that you can see the green. Remember, we set the backdrop to green through this window. It's much brighter than it is over here. That's because the way the light is hitting this, the room is casting a shadow, and this part of the backdrop is much darker than that part is. So we're going to use a glow texture to solve that problem. First, we need to know how big this is. So it is 24 feet wide. So we're going to go to create a new resource, RenderWorks texture, backdrop, image, garden. Okay, and we're going to set the, let's go ahead and make it 24 feet wide. 24 feet. And then we're going to set the reflectivity to glow, which means it will not, it'll be at full no matter what the lighting situation is. It's as if it's lit at full. So if we click OK, then we can apply that texture. If you create a texture, it will, I should have pointed this out with the white, it will automatically load that over here as assuming that if you just created a texture, that's probably the one you want to use. If this isn't right, you can scroll through. So let's see how this, and you'll say, but Bert, there's a shadow there. That's because glow doesn't work in OpenGL. Glow only works in one of the render modes. So you'll see that right now we still have the problem that you can see the backdrop over here and you can't see it over there. But let me go into a render mode. We'll do working and give it a second. And you'll see now the backdrop is not affected by the shadows that were being cast by the wall. So the glow has it on at full. You'll also see that the shiny floor comes into play when we go into one of the render modes. So if we put this back into perspective and now do a render mode again, we'll see what the room actually looks like. And now you can see that you can actually see the backdrop through the windows. So, and the reason this looks funky is because this is a fast working mode. It wouldn't, let me just go ahead and put this in a final mode. It's just going to take a lot longer. But it's going to look better. Or at least a little bit better. Part of this is also because we have bad lighting right now, which we're gonna fix in the next step. But so this is what the textured room looks like. So our next step will be to fix this lighting so that this modeled silliness goes away, and B, so it doesn't look like the room is sitting outside in the parking lot in the sun, so it looks like it actually has interior lights the way a room would. But before we move on from the texturing, I just want to point out that now that all the textures are applied, it would be, if you wanted to, really simple to change them. So for instance, if I wanted to change this wallpaper, I could simply go to the resource manager, right click on the wallpaper to edit it, and change the image if I wanted to. If you happen to be a big UCF fan. You can do that to any of the textures. Once they're applied, you can always go back in and just change them. And sort of cycle through design ideas. What we want to do with the lighting is to try to achieve a room that looks like it's being lit by the sources that are available, and in that case it's the light coming through the windows. There are no other lights in this room. We're going to theatricalize it a little bit, but we definitely want to get away from the look here of the sun lighting the room that has no ceiling. So I'm going to open up the visualization palette so I can access the lights, and I'm going to turn off the sun. Or the directional light source that we installed. The next thing I'm going to do is create a black background, since this is sort of potentially a theatrical set. I'm going to put it in a black background, so I'm going to edit the scenery layer by right-clicking on it and assigning a RenderWorks background the black black background. Okay, so that looks a little better. I'll say now that some of this lighting, or actually all of this lighting, is dependent on rendering modes. And I recognize that some of you with your computers may not be able to access the rendering modes. So do the best you can. I realize that some of it won't work for you. So just sort of watch the video and play along and see what happens. So the first thing I'm going to do is look at this. The glow texture will actually, that's on the background, emit some light if we're in a rendering mode that has indirect lighting enabled, which all of our RenderWorks styles that I've created for the class have. So we'll look at that first, but before I do that, I'm going to edit these these render styles to have black backgrounds. So I'm going to back out and look at the RenderWorks styles for this project. We're just going to edit the backgrounds to all have black backgrounds. So we're going to do the quick and the working and the final. Black background. Okay. So if we, just with no lights on, just the glow texture of the backdrop set, let's render this, and I'm going to do it in, well, I'll just go ahead and do it in Final so you can see what, you may not be able to do it in Final, but I'll see what happens. It's going to take a minute or two. So there's our first window. There's our second window. Okay, so there is light outside the windows, but it's not providing much light internally, so we're going to have to help this out a little bit with some theatrical lighting. So I'm going to go back to OpenGL here. What we're going to do is supplement the light from the actual background with a couple of spotlights coming in through the windows. So that's step one. We're going to go to top and use insert a light using the spotlight mode. I'm going to put it here-ish and point it through the window. I'm going to go to left view, wireframe, raise it up, and then into an isometric view and point it at the window. Let's see, back to left. Okay, so that should give us light coming in through the window. Then I'm going to duplicate that and drag it over so we can have light coming through that window. I'm going to move this one back a little bit so it's in the same place as the other one. All right, so let's go to front perspective and see, you can see a little bit of the effect of the light coming in on the shutters there. Let's see what happens. I'm going to go back to our final rendering style and see if that helped any. So we're getting better. We can see a little more of the room by adding those lights. And the windows themselves certainly look better, like there's light coming through them, but we still can't see a lot of the room. So which probably means that we can do a couple things. We can add some internal sources we can turn up the ambient light. I'm going to try that first. So I'm going to, since I'm using a rendering mode, turning up the ambient light in the lighting options won't help because the rendering mode overwrites basically the global option. So I'm going to edit my rendering mode again. So I'm going to edit my final render here. I'm going to go into lighting, and so the ambient right now is set at 3. I'm going to turn the ambient up to 25 and see what that does for us. And it will re-render. So getting a little closer, I can turn the ambient light up more, but it's a flat light and it's going to sort of flatten everything out. So rather than do that, I'm going to add a couple of helper lights, basically to bump up the level of the light in the room. So we're going to go to wireframe, I'm going to go to top, and I'm going to put in a couple of point sources. I'm going to put one right here. I'm going to set them to have smooth fall off. And a brightness of about 60, I think. And then we're going to go to, actually I'm going to duplicate that and put another one here. And another one here. And then go to front. Whoops, I do know how to go to front. Front. Wireframe. And move all of these up so that they're more in the room. So the two that are close to the windows are sort of supporting the light coming through the window. The one at the top of the stairs is assuming that there may be another light source, another window at the top of the stairs that we can't see. And then I'm also going to add one out front here that sort of simulates something on this side. There's light bouncing off this wall that doesn't exist, or something similar. So let's go back to front perspective now and see how this works. So there's a little bit of a funky shadow going on right here, but other than that, it's starting to look more like a room that's actually realistically lit. I can play around with I have to figure out what's casting that shadow. Maybe let's go to the top. So back to wireframe, top. I think I may set this light to not cast shadows, and I'm going to bump it up to 100. That may solve some of that problem. So let's go back to front perspective. I will say at this point that the lighting, it can be tedious because sometimes you just have to play with it until you get it right, and it's rarely as easy as just illuminating the scene the way it's actually illuminated, unless you're outdoors. Outdoors is really easy because you just turn the sun on and it looks great. Interior lighting is much harder, as it is in real life on stage or on film sets. Lighting to make things look realistic, it usually involves a whole lot more lights than you would think. But now, there we go. Okay, so now we have much more realism. It would also look more real if you could actually see something happening through the doors and through the outside. But overall, this looks pretty good. Some of you may not be able to render this, if you can't, even in OpenGL, it doesn't look too bad. So to complete part 1 here, what you should do is viewport this to a sheet layer, hopefully in a rendering mode, but if you can't, OpenGL is okay. And that will be our first sort of finished textured and lit rendering. So that's the end of part 1. And then in part 2, which will be much shorter, we will generate some plans from this 3D model.